Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Ukraine War breaking news update for the just about still the 30th of March 2025 UK time. We are going to talk about Donald Trump and some fascinating news that has just come out. Something that we had been predicting as a potential before the Trump administration took over after the election in November. And that is that Trump could, if the right situation came about, get really peed off with Russia, with Putin, if Putin overplays his hand. And that's one of the best outcomes for Ukraine, because even before the election, it seemed that Donald Trump wasn't too enamored with Ukraine and appeared to be pro-Russian. That seemed to come to pass, and all this stuff has been taking place with negotiations where it seems that the US is somewhat aligned with Russia and has been trying to extort Ukraine and screw Ukraine over. But Trump sees himself as a big kind of mafia boss leader, the strongman leader. And in a world of other strongman leaders, if one strongman leader makes you look a bit like a fool, then you're going to react big time against them. And rather than seeing the world as a place that could be carved up between you strong men, at some point those strong men are going to have to come against each other. And this maybe is a premature example of that happening. Okay, so this is NBC Meet the Press talking in terms of what Trump has said today.
Just hours ago, President Trump called me to tell me he is, quote, pissed off with Russia's President Putin and threatened to impose secondary tariffs on Russia's oil. Quote, if Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia.
Boom, right? Exactly what we've been wanting. Those secondary tariffs are hugely important. Like, you need to be hitting, as the US Treasury was doing before the Trump administration, China and India. You need to be hitting these places that are the destination of Russia's oil, not necessarily tariffs on Russia themselves from the US. They are heavily sanctioned as it is, but tariffs on these other nations. I presume that is what is being discussed.
Mr. Trump said 25% tariffs on Russian oil could happen any moment and told me he plans to speak with President Putin this week. The president told me, quote, I was very angry, pissed off when Putin started getting into Zelensky's credibility and started talking about new leadership in Ukraine. Just hours ago,
which is interesting. So it's the new leadership in Ukraine part, and demanding that Zelensky be, which is interesting because Trump had kind of been talking about that previously, and saying his poll numbers are low and he needs elections. But something has happened whereby, and it could be this diktat that, or the demand that Putin put out this week, that actually Zelensky and his Nazi regime should be ousted and a UN-run government should be put in its place. Seemingly that may have annoyed Trump. So Trump has reached that point of being openly angry with Putin. That's exactly what we want to see. Like, I was thinking the only hope now for Ukraine was Europe. But now we do have a possibility that Trump could do what we always thought he could do, which is get really annoyed with Russia. And then he really could have ended this war by being stronger against Russia and taking all the plaudits. If he wanted a Nobel Peace Prize, if that was really what was floating his boat, then he should have come in and said, right, we're going to screw over Russia by completely incapacitating them, by whacking up even greater sanctions, hitting other nations that are taking that Russian oil, and bringing down the price of oil, which is what he wants, that help his own economy, and then helping Ukraine out with loads of weaponry as well. That would have, I think, just brought about, expedited an end to this war in the favour of Ukraine. He can still do that, but he's gone a really circuitous path to achieve that, if that is going to happen. Now, I'm not sure that is going to happen. This is just one telephone conversation with one reporter, right? And the problem is for Trump is all the people around him, that inner circle, that's those Stephen Millers of the world, and the Donald Trump Jr. and Tucker Carlson of the world, the JD Vances of the world. They, unfortunately, are not fans of Ukraine and seem to be greater fans of Russia. Then there's also this. So Colby Badwar has just pointed out that notable readout from number 10, so from the UK government, of a Trump-Starmer telephone call. President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer, quote, agreed on the need to keep up the collective pressure on Putin. Now, this came 6 hours ago. So this is in response to Kristen Welker, who was the reporter there. That's Kristen Welker. I'm wondering whether that annoyance with Putin could, this is maybe me being too sort of pro-British or whatever, could have come from information coming from Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister spoke to President Trump this evening. The President opened by wishing His Majesty the King best wishes and good health. They discussed the productive negotiations between the respective teams on a UK-US economic prosperity deal, agreeing that these will continue at pace this week. Discussing Ukraine, the Prime Minister updated the President on the productive discussions at the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris this week. The leaders agreed on the need to keep up the collective pressure on Putin. In other words, that's aligned with what Trump was just saying. They agreed to stay in touch in the coming days. Now, I don't know what the time frame is here, whether this was before the phone call with Kristen Welker or after it, but there is an alignment here, right? And I've talked previously about that ecosystem that Trump has, and his ignorance, he doesn't read, doesn't take intelligence briefings, means that he is completely dependent on those people around him to give him the information on Putin, to give him the information on Zelensky, Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine. And he comes out with pro-Russian talking points like thousands being surrounded in Kursk, the thousands of Ukrainians being surrounded in Kursk, the country of Russia being of Ukraine being in rubble, all the cities being bombed and destroyed, and etc., etc. Nothing he says about Ukraine appears to be correct. So where's he getting that information from? Now, when you then have a phone call with Keir Starmer, who's got a real firm grasp on what's going on, then you have this influx of new information potentially, and information that's very useful for you, that bypasses the filter of those people immediately around him. It's not to say the US intelligence is devoid of this information. Of course they have this information, but the intelligence community seems to be unable to get that information into the White House to the very top. Probably due to people like, I wonder who's the director of national intelligence. Oh, Tulsi Gabbard. Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard. All of these people, I know that FBI won't have too much to do with it, but all of these people that are around Trump are not the people who are going to be allowing the free flow of accurate information on Russia and Ukraine. I think getting to the top, getting to the president. So there could be a connection here, or maybe not. But there's good news for Ukraine if Putin has really overstepped the mark. And this is something he's done a couple of times previously. I can't actually remember the exact times, but there's been like three or so times during the course of this war. It's been a long war, goodness, where I've said, I don't think that was very clever of Putin. There's a lot of times where Putin is very wily, very cunning, knows what he's doing, and is manipulating people like Trump and lots of people. In fact, Biden as well, reflexive control. The whole anti-escalation management of the Biden regime was one of reflexive control, where Russia was controlling how the US would react to any given situation. So actually, them being the Biden administration not giving enough aid to Ukraine was the control of Russia, sort of indirectly. He's been very wily, Putin, but there have been a few times where it's like, that's not a very clever thing to have done. Actually, sending those missiles in that's not really good thing to do when that's, going out on a world stage, and that's overplaying your hand a little bit, or doing that. And I can't remember some of the really big instances where I've said this, but here's another one, actually just dragging out these negotiations maybe too long, or putting too many conditions back to the US, so the US just ends up saying, no, actually, you are taking a piss now. At some point, there's this kind of tipping point, and it seems like the US has reached that tipping point. Now, if if Russia played that a little bit more sensibly, then maybe you would have reached that tipping point. But something has taken place clearly, and it could well be that Putin has overplayed his hand, and that's good news for Ukraine because they desperately need. Like, Trump could easily do the right thing. Like, it's within his power to easily do the right thing now. It's just really easily just put loads of sanctions on Russia and just give Ukraine a bunch more weaponry. I mean, it's not, or at least give them the $3.8 billion worth of presidential drawdown authority that's left to give congressionally appropriated. Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait to see. It's just an off-the-cuff remark potentially from Trump, but it could also be reflective of a growing distaste for the Kremlin positioning that we have seen over the last week or so. Anyway, let me know what you think. Will this just be a flash in the pan, or could Trump be on the turn and back to an alignment with, I don't know, reality and morality and the right thing for the US to do? Answers on a postcard. In the meantime, take care, guys. Speak soon.